And, you know, when you're doing a good little job, people get to know you. So I said, well, she's just another person who has acknowledged that I'm not doing a bad little job. And I met another friend, and he told me, look, Ralph, I have $120 in the ATM. You see that lady there? He pointed at her very well attired. This is not a vagrant, this is somebody who carried herself well. He said, look, she just walked up to me and told me, sir, I do not have any money. Please, could you help me? I wish I could call his name. And I hope he's hearing me now. He needs to be acknowledged here anonymously. And he went and took $50 off his ATM that had $120. And he said, watch me now. And he and I are walking to the car park. And he passes by her, and what we do in Barbados, he squeezes the $50 into the palm of her hand. If you have tears, prepare to shed them now. The red benches have not brought prosperity to the hardship that that lady is suffering. The red benches have not brought prosperity to the suffering people of this country. So you can paint the benches red. But the light bill has urgent in red too on the envelope for a lot of the people in this country. And when the electricity bill comes and it has red urgent on the envelope, the people tremble. And government, Your Honor, I am going to come to government's relationship with the Barbados Labour Party before you ask me to sit. I'm going to come to that because I've come here to tell the truth. And I'm going to tell the truth this afternoon. Show me a democracy, and I will show you a tyranny in the making. I have dealt with the presentation of the honorable member for Christchurch East Central. You will permit me, Your Honor, to do an overview of this economy. And this will be of particular interest to the honorable member for St. Michael West Central and the honorable member for St. Philip South. This economy continues its over-reliance on tourism. We have been saying for a long time, and before I came across here, the economists were telling this government that this economy needs to be diversified. A respectable economy or an economy cannot claim respectability when it is driven on one industry, unless it is oil or something. You can live on that and disregard the others. Like a few countries in the Middle East, they've become super wealthy on a sole product called oil. But in this little place, we have to diversify. I know the honorable member for Christchurch West, he said for boasted yesterday that he has 6 hotels coming up all at once. And one day, he will come back and tell the people what value those 6 hotels have added. And when I say value, I mean real value, value in dollar terms. And while we have focused on tourism, agriculture seems indifferent. And more of the agriculture seeming indifferent, perhaps the minister is indifferent. Because 3% of GDP is agriculture. And I said that I'm coming here to demystify for the sake of the public, because I believe that this government knows of what I speak. Gross domestic product is the total, the aggregate amount of goods and services exchanged within the thing that we call Barbados. That's what it is. And of all the goods exchanged, goods and services, if you go to a rum shop and buy rum, that is listed as a transaction within the gross domestic product. What is produced domestically and sold, exchanged between parties, between persons. In other words, all that we have, a financial value of all that we have that is subject to barter, exchange, sale, call it what you wish. And of the millions upon millions of dollars, agriculture is 3% in this place called Barbados. When it was predominantly agriculture, it was not a happy place. It was not a happy place. Because we all know that one of the industries, one of the peculiarities of the sugar industry is that it impoverished people. You know who taught me that? Your Honor? I'm not going to say no. But the sugar industry impoverished lots of Barbadians. And so it was a wise government that in the 60s transformed the economy, diversified the economy, and moved away from sugar as a predominant sector and moved to tourism. And there was what you call a happy coincidence, or coexistence, I mean, between the two industries. And there was always that balance. Are we going too heavily on tourism? Are we too heavy on sugar? And so those wise men who created or who completed this project in democracy always guaranteed to this country that there should be that happy coexistence between two industries which gain this country much foreign exchange. We now live in a country that cannot defend its credibility if only 3% of that gross domestic product is in agriculture, and we are around here talking about food security. We talk about all kinds of things. 3 sentences don't pass in here from this government unless you hear about climate change and resilience and ecosystems and sustainability and all kinds of pretty words. I tell you, that's government's biggest industry. If you want a pretty word, knock on this government's house. They're selling cheap, pretty words. But this government is now unable to defend its credibility by having an economy in which only 3% of the gross domestic product is agriculture. Somebody is failing. Somebody is doing wrong. Show me a democracy and I will show you a tyranny in the making. Tyrannies are not always exclusively political. Sometimes they're economic. Sometimes you have oligarchs. Sometimes you have people who are dominant, not because of political power, but because of financial power, monopolies. Powerful people concentrating their power in financial domains to the exclusion of the majority, who must wait for the crumbs from the table. And that is why the rebellions are taking place in this country. That may well be the origins of Whole Town. You may find that Whole Town is not exclusively about heritage. You may find that Whole Town is also about the loss of opportunity, a denial of the right of access, not only to a beach, but denial of the right of access to national resources. And when people see these large buildings going up, it is not only the sea that they're blocking, but they're blocking ambitions and aspirations. It is psychological, my friends. This is the dark time, my love. Where's manufacturing in this economy? I said earlier, and I'll repeat, in the face of the boast by the honorable member for Christchurch East Central that construction is booming, it is not booming for the Barbadian laborer. I see it. I drive by the projects and I look. I am not a theoretical politician. I go into the highways and byways, not to do mischief, but to observe the reality that surrounds. And one day, this government came in here and acquired lands at Bullins Agricultural Station. Man, and I got up and behaved bad in here. Not the kind of bad behavior that would entitle the speaker to put me out, but I protested. I protested because I felt that too much of our agricultural land was going into housing. And I predicted, I said, no doubt they're going to put high-end villas down there because it was just above the West Coast. And in my innocence, I said, I can bet you they put high-end housing down there. And I was laughed at. And I overheard a voice from the other side say, he doesn't even know that the house has gone up already. And that's what this government is doing. This government is proceeding with its projects and then coming to the people after. That is what Whole Town is about, Your Honor. The people in this country feel aggrieved that those negotiations were so advanced and that the people found out all too late. And my friends, government, if you want to believe that you are loved in this country, come take a trip with me. Come take a trip. Come take a trip with me. And you will discover the source of the people's anger. They feel alienated by this government. And so I drove down to Bullins Agricultural Station, figuring that I would see agriculture, figuring that I could mount some protests against the plan to build houses because it came here. By the time I got down there, the houses were up. Houses up. I was leaving Walter Blackman's funeral in St. Peter, and I said, let me seize this opportunity to go into Bullins Agricultural Station and literally feel the soil with all the manure in it, rich. When I got there, Your Honor, when I got there, I saw some houses, almost finished. And I saw a man at the gate. It's like a gated community, one entrance, one exit. I begged him, sir, may I come in here? I discovered that he did not know what I was saying. He's Chinese. He had no idea what I was saying. He's Chinese. And one of my fellow Barbadians came and told me, don't worry about him, you come. But I wanted to speak to him. So I adjusted the speed of my language, and as best as he could understand, like Barbados, or love Barbados. You want to stay, or want to stay? The man in charge of the project is a young Chinese man who says that he wants to stay here. I am not xenophobic, but there's something very interesting going on in this country. And the natives And that is not used disparagingly. That is used in its real sense. Natives, birthplace, navel string in this earth. Born here, belong here. Must now be aware, or must now wonder, if this government is bringing people into this country who wish to and intend to stay here, and if they wish to stay and they intend to stay, and the government allows them to stay, when election day comes, what will they do? By that time, would immigration, at the urging of the Minister of Home Affairs, have hastened their status such as to allow them to vote? It would be a wise decision if they voted for me, but it would speak of ingratitude on their part. And let us not be lighthearted about it. Everything for this government has a political implication. And I give warning to the people of this country as to this government's activities under the guise of a construction sector. And I say to the people of Barbados again, if you have tears, prepare to shed them now. We may be driven off this landscape and we may be voted off this landscape if we are not careful, if we are not vigilant. But that, sir, represents the betrayal of Barbadian labor by this government. You will hear me later come to housing, and come to housing more particularly, and the sham and the disgrace and the disaster that is housing, mired in scandal. You will hear me say, sir, that the road repairs that are suddenly being done, all of a sudden, everybody can get a road. Roads dishing out in this country now. The honorable member for St. Thomas was in here crying a few weeks ago. Her tears have dried up. I think Bridgefield is no longer the worst road in Barbados. And all this falls under one's overview of the economy. But you know, the people of this country must be told that this government is constructing roads. They call it a mill and pave. You're milling and you're paving. Beg your pardon, sir. This government has found its way onto the South Coast, where I have the honor to represent, having told me a few years ago, you can't get a road because we have to do some subsurface work to the utility lines. And I told the honorable minister at the time, well, I suppose I have to wait. And they said that they sent 5 million up in Oystins after I crossed the floor. And they also said that they're now going to do the whole South Coast. All the utility lines are now fixed, presumably. But to tell the truth, they have not fixed the subsurface utility lines. And it is recognized by this government that the surfacing of some of the roads in this country is now going to be a waste of money because they have to dig up the roads that have been milled and paved. But of course, an election is coming. And if an election is coming, it is more important to waste some public funds to impress the electorate rather than to do things with financial prudence. Who is the beneficiary? Who who is suffering. If you do the whole South Coast as a waste money project, which welfare recipient is denied, there must be some rationality to how you function as a government, to how you spend as a government. It is called financial prudence. But this government is willing to waste taxpayers' money for electoral advantage, and that is another example. Regathering has failed. Let us succeed with mill and pave. Let us purchase some votes while wasting the taxpayers' money on an unnecessary mill and pave program. I beg your pardon, sir? Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of the House until 5 minutes to 6.
Question is that this honorable chairman be suspended until 5 minutes to 6. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chairman stands suspended for 5 minutes.
And I hope that it is not so. I remember the Intel closure traumatized this country. And I wonder if we ever quite recovered from the departure of Intel, so that I am hoping that those rumblings within the manufacturing sector, that is foreign, I hope that those rumblings are not true, and I hope that the rumor is not true, and I hope that it is merely a rumor. The loss of revenue is one thing, but the trauma to lives, local lives, would be quite great. And as I said, this country never quite got over the Intel departure. An overview of this economy would mandate that we take a look at housing briefly. The government had hoped that the construction of houses would have done something for this economy, but during this overview, economic overview, I want again to look at the loss of valuable agricultural lands. It comes close to a crime that rich agricultural lands in this country are being excavated down to the limestone that rests beneath the rich soil and permanently turned into housing. And it is not that we wish to deprive anyone of a house, because this country discovers that the housing market, the construction sector within this economy, is not presently serving the interests of low-income persons. So that's one of the other myths in this economy. And the move from agriculture to housing, I will make the point generally, is slowing this economy down, because within the housing sector, Hope and so on, a lot of the houses are not being sold, which is a dent in economic activity And we've lost the agricultural land. We've lost this product, this sector called agriculture. And that is why, that is one of the reasons that it is at 3% of GDP. Now, it is conceded that there has been some economic growth coming out of COVID, obviously and quite naturally. You are going to experience economic growth. You had an economy that was closed, like all the other economies. And so when an economy reopens, it naturally grows. Growth is natural. But we continue to confront this government with the assertion that a lot of the stated growth is really inflation. It is what you call inflationary growth. That you calculate your GDP in dollar terms. And if you calculate your GDP in dollar terms and you have prices increasing, in other words, the same number of goods one day valued at $100, those same, with inflation, the same number of goods would be valued or calculated at $120. And what government is doing is that it really is calling inflation growth. And what is really inflation is not growth. And that is why, speaking to the public, the economists will argue that the growth is not real, that the growth is inflationary. And we charge this government with that accusation, that the inflation figures reflect a distortion in real growth figures. And you know, Your Honor, inflation not only distorts growth, but it militates against growth. Because Economics 101, if that is what they call it, will tell you that when prices are high, demand decreases. If a commodity is expensive, it will have fewer buyers. And if it has fewer buyers, it remains unsold, and that results in a lack of growth. There's no mystery about these things. Economists, bright economists, discuss these things in their language. Those of us who are not economists, and those of us who are merely heads of households, we are in our own ways economists too. And we speak English, we understand English, and we have a little common sense. And therefore we will understand these, what they will call phenomena, these events, that inflation will affect growth adversely, that goods will remain unsold, goods will remain unbought if the prices are too high. I reinterpret that, I restate that by saying that inflation distorts our perception of growth. Inflation also decreases growth. And so we reach the point where we condemn this government for distorting inflation rates. I think the government has been telling the people of this country who go to the supermarkets in terror that inflation is at 1.4%. Now, we know that this is not likely the case. They use the term goods of origin. I think that's the term they use. Where the goods come from. And if the goods are coming in majority from Canada and the United States. That is going to be interesting over the next few months. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs will become busy over the next few months as he navigates that crisis, that trade crisis between the United States and Canada. It is getting very serious. Yesterday, the Canadian Premier of one of the provinces threatened to withdraw electricity from the United States. So if we think that the only war is or was in Gaza or Ukraine, there's a commercial war raging itself in North America, and it has consequences for us. But let me not digress, Your Honor. Two of our main trading partners are Canada and the USA, and they experience inflation at somewhere in the region of 7%. Now, if the majority of our goods are coming from the United States and Canada, and they are experiencing inflationary growth of 7%, it means that we also, in purchasing those goods, are paying prices at 7% increase. And that when those goods come here, it is impossible for those goods to be sold at less than that 7% increase, unless they're doing philanthropic work, unless there's some charity, or unless they're bringing in things to give away. So it doesn't make sense, really, for the government to continue to argue that inflation is growing at the rate of 1.4%, while inflation across Canada and the United States, where we are purchasing our goods, are experiencing inflationary rates of 7%. So this government needs to visit the people of this country with figures that reflect reality. In other words, figures that are the truth that we have come here to speak today. The government has claimed, I believe, that our growth is in the region, I think they're saying 4%, and that they expect that it will fall this year to 3.5%. Countering their claim as to 4%, we say that those real growth figures are in the region of 3.1%. So that when the Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central comes here on Monday, yesterday, and says that this is a budget of bounty, there's no evidence of bounty. If